when you look at the painting, you actually get to see what is the reality there. So Taoism tells us that the whole universe is compared to two complementary poles. One is yin and the other one is yang. Chinese painters participate mentally while viewing their painting. Life has no meaning unless one undertakes the inner spiritual journey. Hello students and welcome to Prep School English classes. Today's session is Chapter 4 from your Hornbill textbook and the lesson title Landscape of the Soul. When I say landscape, it's a painting, it's a art. And when I say soul, it is an emotional or an intellectual energy of art that is a spiritual or a material part of the human being. So what is the lesson all about? I will be discussing today who is the author of the lesson, what is the title and the theme, the significance, the message, who are the characters in this lesson, what is the words or the expressions in the textbook, and with a little summary followed by the kinds of questions that you can expect and the conclusion of the lesson. So with this, let us look at who is the author. Nathalie Roveroy, she is an art historian. She has drawn lots of pictures of cities and medieval art of Europe. Her husband was a Belgian ambassador to India. She had visited India also. During her visit, she in fact has drawn a lot of historical places of India too. So, in this lesson, she talks about two parts. Part 1 is the landscape to soul, the ethics and spirituality in Chinese painting, and the second part deals with getting inside outside art by Brinda Suri. So the lesson has got two parts. Part 1 where you are looking at the ethics of the Chinese painting, and part 2 it is about the getting inside outside art by Brinda Suri. So let's have a look at the overview of the lesson. So what is the story all about? It is a contrast and comparison of various arts, especially between the Chinese and the European art. There is a comparison and there is a contrast. The story is about the contrast and the comparison of various art. So, the central idea is about art and its history. The lesson is about art and its history, and the theme deals completely with arts, with painting. How does art look into a viewer's eyes? So, the story, central idea and the theme is everything to do with art. So, what is the message that this lesson gives us? An artist is the only one who knows his painting within. It's only the artist who understands his painting deep within. So, and the moral is, art is an expression. All of us know what's art. It is an expression. So here it is very, very evident that art is an expression. So how does the lesson conclude? It says, life has no meaning unless one undertakes the inner spiritual journey. What is the conclusion? It says, life has no meaning unless it undertakes the inner spiritual journey. So the whole lesson is related to art. So dear children, the lesson is only about 2 to 3 pages. It's important that you read the lesson because only then you get connected. So with this, let me take you to the characters. When I say characters, it is not a play or, you don't see any conversation here. So when I say characters, it is only that, we get to see these names in the lesson. So few are here for you. The first one is Wu Dazai. Wu Dazai, you can pronounce it in any kind. I wouldn't know the exact pronunciation. So Wu Dazai, he is a Chinese painter, followed by Xuanzong. Xuanzong, he is an emperor who had appointed Vidhyaashram, and then you have Quentin Mendes. He is also a Belgium painter, and then you also get to see Nikunj, who is an India's self-taught artist. So these four names reflects in the lesson. One is Vidhyaashram, who is a Chinese painter, and then Xuanzang, he is an emperor of the 8th century, and Quentin Mendes is a Belgium painter, followed by Nikunj, who is an Indian and is a self-taught artist. So with these characters, let's move forward to understand what is the lesson all about. I've told you the lesson is a comparison of Chinese painting and then to the European painting. So when you look at the Chinese art, it looks something like this. What happens here? It is the way the viewer looks at it. The viewer has to get deep into it to understand what is the painting all about. But when you look at the European painting, it is how the viewer's eye roll through the painter's painting. Now, when you look at that, you will understand what is the painter actually is trying to tell us. He's depicted it well that we see the same thing whatever he has seen. Whereas in the Chinese art, it is you need to go deep into it and understand from your view. So these are the two kinds of art that the lesson deals with. So let's understand what is the difference between a Chinese and a European art. So when you look at the Chinese art, it is not about creating a real landscape. Chinese art does not deal with creating a real landscape. It is the artist's spiritual and inner voice. The painting shows us the inner voice of the artist. It is a spiritual feelings. It is his inner art that we get to see. So it lets the viewer create a path for their imagination. So the viewer is free to imagine in the way he wants to imagine it. So understand, Chinese art is not about creating a real landscape. It is the artist's spiritual and inner voice. We get to see the artist, whoever has painted, their spirituality, their inner voice that painting contains. And then it lets the viewer imagine the painting in his own view. But when you look at the European painting, what happens here? It reproduces an actual view. What has the painter drawn? That actual view only we get to see. So the artist shows what he actually wants to show. What is that he wants to show us in the painting? That is what the European art shows us. And the artist wants the viewers to be in the landscape. He wants the viewers to be in that painting. He wants the viewers to see the painting as if that they are seeing through his eyes. Whatever he sees in the painting, he wants the viewers also to see. But a Chinese painter wants the viewer to imagine the painting in his own way. Whereas the European painter makes the viewer understands what the painting is all about. He wants the viewer to be in that painting itself. He wants the viewer to view the painting as how he has viewed it, as how he has seen it through his eyes. Thus, through the lesson, it's very evident to observe the contrast and the comparison of Chinese and European arts. Moving forward, let's look at the words or few expressions in context. I will just be off screen so that you can view the board. Have a look at it. Eye of a landscape means link which leads to the true meaning of a landscape. Middle void means space between two elements of an image where they interact. Conceptual space is a relation with abstract instead of the factual. Hellenistic liking. Technique of using pictorial method to deceive the eye. Delicate realism. Quality of art which makes it seem real. essence of inner life and spirit, inner meaning of art or mystery of the universe, figurative painting, representation of a piece of art through the eyes of the creator. So these were few of the expressions that you get to see which are highlighted in the textbook lesson that you need to understand. Moving forward, when you look at few of the words which are unfamiliar, splendid means impressive. Anecdote is a story of a real person. SWOT is hit something. Apprentice is a trainee. Conduit is channel. Oppressed is burdened. And lofty is tall. Moving to some more, sneaked means what? Moved secretly. Shan Shui means Chinese word for landscape. Shan Shui means Chinese word for landscape. It is important probably for 1 mark you can expect this question. In is receptive and feline. It is receptive and feline. Receptive is willing to accept. Disciple is a follower. Dwells means stay and landscape means painting of the countryside. So these were few of the words that you need to understand. Have a look at it. So getting to know the words in context and the expressions in the textbook, let's understand the lesson, what is landscape to the soul. So the chapter title, Landscape of the Soul, wherein landscape is a painting and soul is the inner meaning to the painting. I will be discussing under these topics the lesson. I start with an introduction, giving you an anecdote of the Chinese painter Wu Dezai, and anecdote of an European painter, meaning of the tales, basis of Chinese painting, what is Taoism, what is Shan Shui, what is the second part of the lesson, that is getting inside outsider art, and then you get to see a conclusion. So with this, let me take you in detail what is the lesson all about. So when you look at the introduction of the lesson is all about the contrast and the comparison of different forms of art, especially the Chinese art and the European art. So when you look at it, what is that you see here? You see a European art and you see a Chinese art. A European art wherein when you see, you can get to know what it is. And then when you go to the Chinese art, you need to deeply imagine and think, what does that view like, isn't it? So what is the lesson all about? Comparative study of European and Chinese painting. A form of expression is art. All of us know that art is a form of expression. Art cannot be defined, but it has to be felt, isn't it? Anecdotes related to Chinese and European painting is a lesson, what is involved in, and then Shan Shui is reflected in Chinese painting. So these are the few things where the lesson touches upon. Moving forward, let us see the anecdote of a Chinese painter. Now, Xuanzong, who was Xuanzong? He was an emperor. He had commissioned a painter to paint his palace wall. So what happened? Who was the painter? So 8th century emperor was who? Xuanzong. He appointed a painter, Wu Dezai, to paint a landscape. That is, to decorate a palace wall. So the painting was ready. The emperor would see the painting every day. He enjoyed looking at the forest, at the high mountains, the waterfalls, the clouds, men on the hilly path, birds in flight, birds flying, etc. in the painting. So the emperor would look at the wall and how the painter has painted, and he was really appreciating and he was enjoying it. So what happened further? The painter, that is Wu Dezai, he was a painter in the AD 680 to 759. He was not too very happy. He wanted to take the emperor deep inside to understand his painting. He wanted the emperor to know what is within the painting. Alright, so he takes him near the painting, and then what happens? So the painter was unsatisfied that the emperor was just looking at his painting and understanding the outer thing, that is the birds, the mountain, the rivers, the forest. So he was not satisfied. He invited the emperor near the painting by saying, inside resided a spirit. He said to the emperor that inside the painting resided a spirit. The cave opened when the painter clapped his hand. So in the painting, there was a kind of a cave. So when the painter clapped, the cave opened. The inside is splendid, Your Majesty. Let me show you. So he says, the inside of the painting is very splendid, Your Majesty. Let me show you the painting. The painter entered the cave and disappeared. What happened? The cave door closed and the painting disappeared from the wall before the emperor could even move. There was no sight of the painter at all. Even his painting brush, nothing was seen. So this is an incident about Wu Desai's painting, which Xuanzong had an experience with his palace wall painted. So this is a part of your lesson where it explains the Chinese art form, wherein it clearly states that their art has to be understood deep within. Alright? So moving forward, let's understand the anecdote of the European painter. So he is Quentin Metzes. So what is it about him? He was in love with a painter's daughter. Now, the painter wouldn't allow or wouldn't agree for them to be wedded. So what did he do? He secretly got inside his painting studio or whatever and then painted a fly. And when the painter actually later on saw the fly, he thought it was real and he went to shoo it away. And later he realized that it was a painting and to find out who had painted it, and then he got to know the relation and then he got his daughter married. So what is it about? In the 15th century, Antwerp, Belgium blacksmith named Quentin Metzes fell in love with a painter's daughter. He painted a realistic fly by secretly entering to the painter's studio. The artist tried to swat it before he could realize that it was not real. Quentin was accepted and married his beloved, become famous for his realism. So what does the story depict? That there is realism in the European painting. When you look at the painting, you actually get to see what is the reality there. So thus, he became famous for his realism and thus the European painting became famous for realism too. With this, let's move forward to understand few of the meanings of the tales. When you look at the meanings, what is the lesson all about? It says, it is common in China's classical education to study about art or landscape to the soul or anything related to paint. It is a part of a classical education in China. Helped great masters abstract concept and relieves that heart as an inner meaning. It very clearly says that there is an inner meaning of the art and only the artist can identify it. Tales relieve that art as an inner life, meaning and soul. Just like how the emperor's tale I put up that the painter clapped, the cave opened, he went inside and he disappeared. So there are lots of tales, such tales, which is a part of their classical education. So, for the emperor, what happened in that tale, in that story, what we got to know? For the emperor, it is only ruling of the kingdom. He doesn't see beyond that, isn't it? But the painter showed him the soul. The painter showed him the spiritual energy, the soul, the inner life and the meaning of the painting. So, that was the moral of that story. So, moving forward, Quentin What did he signify? What did he do? His likeness in the European painting was realism, isn't it? So Quentin signified illusionistic. Illusionistic means what you see, what you understand, what you view. So Quentin signified illusionistic likeness in the European painting. Okay. Now another Chinese was there. You know about the dragon, isn't it? The monster. So when he was painting that, he did not want to draw or paint the eyes to the dragon. Why? Because he believed that it is going to get life and it is going to kill him or it is going to eat him. So another Chinese painter who did not want to paint the eyes of a dragon. For what reason? For the fear that the dragon might attack on seeing him. Thus, the contrasting nature is explained through anecdotes. Thus, with these kind of anecdotes, with these kinds of stories, one can understand the contrast and the comparisons of different kind of art. So moving forward, let's look at the basis of Chinese painting. So these are few of the kind of Chinese painting. So what does it show us? It is based on the philosophy of Taoism. Now, what is Taoism? Tao means the path or the way. In the next slide, let's look at what is Taoism. The way of mystery into the universe. So it shows us the path into the universe. So that is Taoism. So we have seen it that an emperor may rule the dynasty, but only the artists know the way within. And then unless we take the inner spiritual journey, life has no meaning. Thus, with a tale that is in the lesson, what do we understand? That the painter, Daozi, he wanted to show the inner meaning of art and mystery of the universe to the emperor. So with this, let's move forward to understand the basis of Chinese painting. So you look at the Chinese painting over here, what does it say? The Chinese painting shows the spirit. It does not reproduce an actual meaning. It uses the landscape to say more. It wants the viewers to take a plural view. That is not a singular view from the painter's view. It wants the viewers to take their view also. So a plural view point to enter into the painting and travel. He wants our active participation not only physically but also mentally. His landscape is a representation of the inner reality, a spiritual and a conceptual space. So the Chinese painting tells us that we have to view the painting in our view, not only through the painter's view. And then we need to understand the soul, the spirit behind or within that painting. So that being the basis of the Chinese painting, moving forward, let's understand what is Taoism. What do you mean by yin and yang? So when you look at that, the universe is compared to two complementary poles. So Taoism tells us that the whole universe is compared to two complementary poles. One is yin and the other one is yang. So what is it? Yin is feminine and yang is masculine. Now their meeting point where the male and the female meet, that is called as the middle void. Their meeting point is called as the middle void. Now, this interaction, that is the meeting of the feminine and the masculine, this interaction creates an energy which creates a universe. The interaction of these two, yin and yang, brings in an energy that is the creation of the universe. It holds a great significance. So void is essential as nothing can happen without it. So what does Taoism says? It says that the universe is composed of two complementary poles, that is yin and yang. And when they meet, that is the masculine and the feminine, when they meet, they make a multiple void. Now this is the fact for the creation of the universe. So moving forward, let's understand what is Shan Shui. Now what is it? It is a landscape painting. Now Shan means mountain and Shui means water. So it does not represent the real landscape. It does not represent the real landscape. It is the Taoist view of the universe. How does the painter view a universe? That is Shan Shui. Now, so the Chinese painting is Shan Shui, and the unoccupied space there is represented by the middle void, where the interaction of the feminine and the masculine takes place. That is, yin and yang take place. So, man is the mode of communication. So, for the Taoist, the landscape is a view of a universe. It does not represent the real landscape. He says that it has two poles, that is yang and yin, feminine and masculine, and the in-between space is empty. That space is occupied by the man, and he is the mode of communication. So with this, let's look at the second part of the lesson, that is getting inside outside art. So what do you mean by getting inside outside art? That means not everybody has to be an artist only when they undergo a certain amount of training. They are not only the artist. An artist can be self-made also. So let's understand getting inside outsider art. This describes an art of those people who have no right to be described as artists. That means they have no formal training, but they show talent and artistic insight. So this is growing fastest internationally. One simple example is about Nikunj. So who was Nikunj? He was an Indian self-made artist. It is something very great to know about it. Of course, a very great personality who is not basically an artist, but using all the crap and all the debris, he has made an artistic part which has been internationally famous. So what are we talking about him? He is an 80-year-old creator and director. He is no more now. He is passed in 2015, I think. He is India's biggest contributor of outside art. He is India's biggest contributor to outside art. He transformed trash and debris into rock garden. His art is recognized as an outstanding testimony of the difference in a single man can make when he lives his dream. So what did he prove to the world? He proved that he became a testimony of difference that a single man can live his dreams. So when you look at his rock garden in Chandigarh, you have to really visit to have a look at all the artwork he has done out of the waste, especially rocks and, broken bangles. So you get to see few of these things in his park. And what does he tell us? So the lesson ends wherein Nikunj says that the biggest reward is walking through the garden and seeing people enjoy my creation, says Nikunj, who was basically not an artist. He was a self-made artist, and he ends the lesson by saying the biggest reward for him is to see the people walk through his garden and have that enjoyment. So with this, let's look at what is the conclusion of the lesson. So when you look at the conclusion of the lesson, man is the medium of communication between two complementary poles, and we can see his presence in the Chinese painting. And then the interaction of two complementary poles make a universe. Chinese painters participate mentally while viewing their painting. Life has no meaning unless one undertakes the inner spiritual journey. So let's get to know with this conclusion what are the kinds of questions that you will see in this lesson. Briefly recount what happened to the painter. How was Quentin able to marry the painter's daughter? What are yang and yin? What do they represent? What is the middle void and why is it important? Going to the long one, illustrate with example the difference between Eastern and Western painting. What are the elements of Shui? Nikunj's work of genius and is appreciated worldwide. You have to elaborate. So these are a few of the questions. When I come on my live interaction, let me teach you even the one-word question and answers and all the answers in detail. So dear children, remember, art can bring a different perspective to life. Art is an expression. Art is something to be felt. So when you understand art, the perspective to your life changes. See you in my next session, Ailing Planet. Until then, all smiles to you. Bye-bye.